Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think we're all here, so I'll call the General Purposes Committee meeting to order. May I have a motion on the minutes? Someone wave their hand.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. So we've got the two items of business. We've got proposed tidally influenced Terra Nova Slough update. Now, I should tell you that in the waiting room, well, they'll be ushered into the meeting now, we have three of the consultants who have been working on this, who have indicated that they are here to answer any questions. Patrick Lilly, Colin Christensen, and Alan Johnson. So we'll turn it over to staff. What would you like to tell us about?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is Alex Kernitsky from Parks Planning, Design, and Construction. I'm available. I have nothing further to add, and I'm available to answer any and all questions you may have. I would like to also let you know that Jason Ho from Engineering Planning, as well as Chad Paulin from the Environment, are also available for any questions related to this report.
All right, well, tell us, just give us a bit of the background on the recommended option. Just what would that entail?
Through the chair to the committee, the proposal is essentially to convert the existing freshwater pond at Terra Nova near the adventure play environment and connect it to the middle arm of the Fraser River. This would entail a connection through the dike underneath River Road and creating a culvert that would have a tide gate structure at the outside of the river side of that outlet structure, that culvert. This would maintain the integrity of the city's flood protection as well as the structural integrity of the dike itself. This would not prevent the city from raising the dike to 4.7 or the ultimate level of 5.5 at any future date. As the tide goes up and down, the water would go in and out of the slough. The water that is currently fresh in the pond would thus become tidally influenced. So it would be brackish water, a mixture of salt and fresh water from the Fraser River and the Pacific Ocean or the Salish Sea. As the tide goes in and out, so would fish, and it is determined that most likely juvenile chum salmon would occupy the slough during the time when the floodgate is open and the water is coming in and staying in the slough before tide goes out again, and the fish would also be permitted to go back out into the middle arm. The project would entail upgrades to the slough itself by digging out some of the organic matter that's settled over the years at the bottom of the pond and converting it and structurally so that it functions appropriately and flushes with each tide cycle. And of course the installation of the tide gate itself, which would be designed and constructed to be the same standard as a pump station. So it has to be seismically robust.
Okay, so I take it that the costs you have given us, if whatever option we choose, it's an order of magnitude. We would have to do some more work in analysis, fine-tune that, and put that in as part of a capital budget process. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so we got some speakers here. We'll start off with Councillor McPhail. Linda?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff, well, thank you very much for the report. On RGP 12, about halfway down, it talks about the proposed project would have it would impact portions of the existing park and freshwater pond. Could you expand a bit on that?
So, through the chair to Councillor McPhail, if you were to approve us proceeding with option 1,
Yes.
there would be minimal impacts to the surrounding area of the slough. So, like the Terra Nova play experience and other portions would not be impacted. But the slough itself would need to be reconstructed. And for example, that there's a walkway, a bridge, a floating bridge that goes across the middle right now. Well, that would need to be removed and reconstructed as a proper bridge. Yeah, so, and we would also probably tune up the planting around the proposed slough for to be appropriate for tidally influenced slough that would benefit the fish that would occupy the slough.
All right, thank you. And then on GP 15, at the very bottom paragraph, it says, the staff recommendation for this option is subject to the city obtaining habitat offsetting credits in a defined agreement with the DFO. So what is the process for that and the timeline for that?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, the timelines vary and would be subject to a discussion and agreement with the Department of Fisheries, and would, because the project would be under the auspices of the Federal Fisheries Act.
Okay, so that's actually my last question. So on GP 17 in Table 1, the last regulation and other consideration, it says the slough would become subject to regulation of the Federal Fisheries Act when connected to the Fraser River. So what are the pros and cons of that?
Well, through the chair to Councillor McPhail, if I understand your question correctly, because we're connecting to the slough, thus a federal water body, and we're permitting salmon into the tidally influenced slough, the result is that we come under federal jurisdiction for that water body. Right now, the pond itself is isolated from the river and is only subject to provincial regulation. Not sure if it's a question of benefits or cost, of pros and cons of that, as so much as it is a statement that because we're connecting to the river, we then become subject to those regulations.
So I guess my question really then is there added liability to the city because of that, or are we subject to more rigorous regulations in the park area because of that, or?
Through the chair, to Councillor McPhail, I would have to defer to my colleague Chad, perhaps in environment, to respond to that question, please.
Yeah, of course. Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, exactly. It would just be another additive federal jurisdiction that would be added to that area. There would be a defined area that would be subject to authorization within there, so it wouldn't technically be the whole park, but you're correct in stating that it would be an additional layer of legislation that would be applicable to that area.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McNulty, Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Yes, a good report. Just a couple questions. We've been wanting this for a long time. It's almost back to when I was Chair Parks and Rec. Just a question through to Harold. We just got a memo from Harold. This is what we envisioned before in terms of the memo. I'm hoping that this is an agreement. The only thing I had was with the existing slough. If we happen to have any fish, etc., in it, regardless of tide, etc., how are we going to protect the slough from the public? And any problems vis-a-vis, let's say there's a half a dozen fish in there of one sort or another, etc. I can foresee, given the layout, and I realize we've got to have the slough, and I'm glad we've got it. But what about protection from garbage and this and that and the other thing? And people, people are people. Parks are parks. You know what I'm talking about. So I guess my question is, how are we going to protect it?
Alex?
Because it is part of the fisheries.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, With regular maintenance by staff, the pond itself would be maintained on a regular basis. But with respect to debris coming in from outside, from the river, into the system, it's my understanding that the tide gate would have baffles or like a grating to prevent material from coming in to contaminate, if you will, with or just having garbage in the slough. But also, it's a protection measure to ensure that the tide gate closes appropriately.
I'm more concerned about human debris than I am the tidal stuff. No problem. And as you know, just a short distance away from there is a favorite fishing spot for sportsmen. And I'll just leave it at that. That's what I'm worried about, is fish that may be trapped in there, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, thank you. Good report. I'm going to support it.
All right, Councillor Steves.
Thank you very much. Excellent report. And all these studies have been done, not just the option one, but the whole report is just really well done. I guess the question I've got is looking at the report, one idea that we had, and I must say that one other thing before I begin, is that the people that designed the slough in the first place, most of them are dead and gone. And I'm not sure, Don Trathuri, who was the head of chief biologist and Laxan, he retired and moved to the Kootenays. I don't know if he's still around or not. But this is exactly what they envisioned. And so I think your consultants have really looked at it very closely and said, yes, this can be done. So I think that's very positive. The question I've got, however, is that I sent a memo to council just a few minutes ago. Richmond at one time was just a mass of sloughs, and the sloughs that had a sandy bottom had spawning salmon. Those that had a muddy bottom were full of sturgeon. But all the sloughs had minnows and sticklebacks and stuff like that. And there was a study just came out this last while that the herons are taking up to 6% of the salmon fry, and that's because there's nothing left. So I guess my thought is that with an open slough, we should be able to attract minnows and sticklebacks and things like that. We wouldn't necessarily be consuming, but at least it might feed our herons instead of feeding them salmon fry. But the thought I had was that it may well be that we could actually stock the slough with chum salmon, and salmon might come back to spawn again. When the dikes were built in 1907, the salmon kept coming up to the dike where the sloughs ended. And when I was not even when I was a kid, when I was a youth, they were still spawning at the end of Steveston Highway until about 1968, when the city filled the slough in, and we never saw them again. And so if we had salmon coming in, my question is, could we, as part of this, add a bit of sandy bottom to the bit of the slough that's outside the dike, and you might get salmon spawning there if they weren't prepared to come in through the gate. They might at least spawn in front of it. And I just wonder if anybody had thought about that, because they were spawning just in a small spot right in front of my house here years ago.
Through the chair to Councillor Steves, it's our understanding that the slough as designed would not support the spawning adult salmon, but rather juvenile salmon, chum salmon that would otherwise be transitioning to the open ocean. Perhaps I could refer this to Mr. Alan Johnson, who is a fisheries biologist from KWL, if you have anything further to add, Al?
Thanks, Alex. Yes, through the chair to Councillor Steves. It would be wonderful, from a educational, visual point of view, to have spawning at a location like that. But unfortunately, the conditions are just not conducive. You really need a consistent source of oxygenated fresh water, and we don't find that in tidally influenced sloughs. So we'll be making a contribution in terms of juvenile fish habitat, but spawning is not viable.
My question was, what about outside the dike, though? Because they did spawn outside the dike. And because that'd be fresh river water.
Through the chair again to Councillor Steves. It doesn't, notwithstanding, your personal observation, the conditions within the river there are not appropriate or suitable for spawning, and they really have to move well far upstream to find the substrates and either the flowing water or groundwater that's needed for successful incubation.
Okay, thanks. Anyway, great report, and I certainly support option 1 that's recommended.
Councillor Wolf, Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair, I have a number of questions on this matter, and thank you for having some expert opinion in the Zoom room here, because I'm going to have some questions for them as well as our own staff. So that's great, everybody's here. First off, I'm not sure how many people have seen a video of the local chum salmon spawning. If you just want to jot the title of it down, watch it on YouTube later. It's called Chum Salmon Spawn. It's by Bob Turner, a local photographer, or underwater photographer. And anyway, that's what I'm envisioning of this project. When I hear about salmon habitat creation, that we have a place where they can spawn. And so to follow up some of the previous questions first from other councillors, so to further the discussion from Councillor McPhail on federal jurisdiction, do we, this to our staff, do we have any waterways in Richmond, any canals, any ditches, any water areas where there is already fish? And would that not make it already a federal jurisdiction? So do we have examples in Richmond already with this arrangement?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, right now we do have species of fish in some of our riparian area ditches, mostly the stickleback and pumpkin seed variety. Really, the applicability to DFO regulations is any connection really to a fish-bearing stream. That's ultimately the Fraser. So in some cases, when you do see work in and around riparian areas within a certain distance from there, in our waterways, then yes, they would be applicable depending on the work and variation of time, applicable to that legislation as well.
Okay, great. And so that's kind of confirm my observations where I've seen herons and kingfishers catch fish in our waterways. So it clearly is something that is not too out of the norm. And then I don't know if that can be comparable at all to places in like Vancouver or Burnaby, where like Still Creek, Stony Creek, or Surrey. There's 8 different places they encourage tourists and residents to go see salmon in 8 different locations, 8 different streams, creeks, hatcheries within Surrey. So would it look a lot different in those arrangements because there's already salmon running through them as opposed to the fish species we have, as was just previously mentioned?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the slough that we have envisioned that would be tidally influenced would be essentially a side channel to the middle arm, and would function as a rearing habitat for juvenile salmon. So these are salmon that are a year or so old or under a year, and they are coming into the slough with the tide, feeding, finding shade and protection under overhanging riparian vegetation along the edge of the slough, and then sorry, I was distracted by the cat, and then swimming out again as the tide recedes, and then they'd be going back out into the middle arm of the river. So it would be, we'd be looking at smaller salmon in their life, juvenile salmon in the overall life cycle.
Yeah, terrific. That's again helping understand the scope of this project. That it's not a all-in-one habitat rearing site for the life cycle. It's part of the food sourcing and the use of the whole estuary. Okay, terrific. And I know I've seen previous plans from Harold Steves and others around a potential estuarium in Richmond, not just an aquarium, but focused on estuary species, and hope that could somehow be part of this long-term project. Now, just to look through the report, a couple other questions that were not asked yet. One is on page 12. This is the paragraph that starts with the focus of this report. The last line in there, it mentions that this may not provide the best habitat enhancement nor compensation opportunity when compared against other potential projects in the city. Curious, what are the other projects that this is being compared to? If you look on the opposite page, page 13, it mentions habitat banking and enhancement at 3 sites there, and then one other on the next page. So a couple of questions there. One, can we get a memo on all of the different salmon habitat, or I guess just habitat in general, and then if there's any fish habitat banking and enhancement, if we can get kind of a profile memo of all of that, because some of them involve salmon habitat and I think some don't. And then this thing about other on the top of page 14, are we able to get a little teaser of what that is about? Because that's it sounds exciting, and I don't know if you want to save the surprise for later.
Absolutely. Through the chair, Councillor Wolf, the projects in relation to the report, Council has been updated on a lot of those projects, namely the application for the South Coast Conservation Area, which includes the 3 restoration projects, the project that the Port is proposing to do in the South Arm Jetty, and then the project that is proposed by the Rain Coast Conservation Authority, also currently completed in the North Arm Jetty as well. The other projects are in reference to some of the projects that we are developing at the staff level that will be further presented to Council in the form of habitat banking and restoration opportunities, which is currently on its way. Typically, what that looks like is replacing some of the lower end habitat in and around the city, which is the riparian area ditches, with higher end marsh habitat, namely inside of the river if possible. All of that, though, is subject to further assessment and analysis, but that is generally the thought when we talk about other opportunities that we're starting to develop in the future.
Perfect. Well, again, if I could get a summary of all of them in all areas, I'd appreciate that. Some
Councillor,
kind of new ones added there would be great.
Councillor, you're going to get a report on that in due course. That's what that says. Okay.
Terrific. Thank you. And to the delegates here from the biologist, question for them. It would be this is the last page of your report. Where's here? I think it's 57 or something. Oh, it's in 2 spots. I think it's the same table. Page 57, or there's one other spot where we might find it. There it is at the back. 64, 57, or 64. I think it's the same table. If you could comment on the column second from the end, fish passability. There was 2 of the options that had excellent, and those are the ones I'm most interested in. These are excellent, I assume, in not just the short-term access, but also long-term with sea level rise. So if you could comment on what makes an option have excellent fish passability.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, those, if I'm not mistaken, those 2 options correspond to those that are just simply a culvert without a tide gate structure, because that option sees them surrounded by a dike that is built to the same standard as the city's dike, that is built to 4.7 with the option to go up to 5.5. So that option has a culvert or an open channel without a tide gate, because it's the slough is essentially isolated from the rest of the city by a dike built to city standards.
All right.
Then the follow up to that, then to step back to staff. Then why is that not one of our why is staff not recommending one of the options that has excellent fish passability?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we are recommending option 1 because it is it provides excellent value for the scope. Second, building a dike around the existing slough would significantly impact the existing Terra Nova area, namely the Terra Nova play experience, as well as a significant stand of mature conifers. Also, we feel that on balance, the tide gate structure and the design that KWL has developed will provide, moderate to very good fish passability, and on balance, that's the option we chose to recommend. You'll see that if it involves the construction of a dike, the proposed cost significantly jumps.
Thank you. Then on that note, I think this is my last question to staff. On the note of cost, can you give a ballpark for the option 4 on page 21? It's the only one that doesn't have a cost. It's undetermined at this time. Are we talking about? Can you give us a range? Can you give us a number? Is this the highest cost? In the middle?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we did not provide a cost because that scope is undetermined, and we would have to get back to you with a cost, even a cost estimate, because I'm not prepared to answer that at the moment.
All right.
Thank you. That was my question.
We'll go to Councillor Au.
Yes, Your Worship, I have 2 questions. Now, when I read the report, I think perhaps out of the first five options, they seem to be similar in terms of the results, right? The achievements of the results. For example, right, for flood risk, habitat value, things like that, they are very comparable. At least I do not see day and night differences. So it seems to me that only difference is the cost. I mean, option 1 is the most inexpensive. So is it fair to conclude that option 1 is the most inexpensive option to achieve similar or comparable results? Would that be a fair conclusion?
Through the chair to Councillor Au, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And my second question is very similar to the one that Councillor Wolf has just raised. Yes, I also noticed the difference in fish passability. Now, 1 and 3, 4 are similar, right? It's said that as moderate, but for 2 and 5, it's different. So I would like to ask staff, why won't staff recommend that we should give more consideration to this factor? I mean, should this factor not getting more weight in considering the whole package? Because I don't know, will it eventually make the growth of salmons more difficult if, in the future, the possibility is being compromised. So why does this factor not getting bigger consideration?
Through the chair to Councillor Au, if I understand your question correctly, I think I would respond in a similar fashion to Councillor Wolf's question, in that the option 1 provides on balance a moderate to good fish passability, as well as overall cost-benefit analysis in terms of achieving the goal of the project, which is to convert the existing slough to a tidally influenced system that would that is suitable for rearing chum salmon. The other options would involve impacts to the park, or setting aside the Terra Nova slough and potentially impacting other areas of the park. So again, on balance with our work with KWL, option one was recommended as the way to go, with all factors considered.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you to staff for this, and thank you to the consultants. Now, a few weeks ago, we passed the Accelerated Flood Protection Program concept and flood protection rate structure review. And so, if we sort of look back to that on CNCL 420, it talks about, the level of sea rise, the 1 meter sea rise happening, and, our original estimate was going to be in 2100. But then we decided that we would change our assumption to protect for that level by 2073. And so if we're thinking that that is, in fact, what's going to happen, so by 2073, under option one, we could only be having 34% of the floodgate open. Is that what we're saying? So I'm wondering if it would have made sense to use the same assumptions for all of our city projects, especially when we're looking at this kind of stuff. Because it seems to me if we're going to make this investment, doesn't option 5, which is actually the preferred option of all the project options, it is more expensive, but it's because it's diked, it actually has the longer term benefit in doing this. Because otherwise we're maybe only looking at a 50-year project and then it's over. Or is that okay for everyone, I guess, is the question.
Let's get an answer.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, by having an open channel, an open connection to the river, you will certainly get a system that performs throughout the tide cycle. There's no question about that. That said, constructing a ring dike around, whether it be the existing Terra Nova Slough in option 2, or in a way opening new ground south of Westminster Highway in the rural park and creating a dike in that area, and then going through, as the diagram shows, at 3 points to connect to the Growerlands. Yes, you will have performance throughout the tide cycle. Again, on balance, we were looking at overall cost, fish passability, utilizing the existing slough that was constructed in 2004 and the project considered in 2007. And to respond to the referral, we went ahead and recommended option 1 as the option to go with.
Okay. Now on GP16, maybe this is for the consultant, it says salmonids won't use a dark tunnel. So would there be lighting in the tunnel then, or how do we get them to go and use the tunnel?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, Alan, could you please provide some light on that?
Seeing as we're going to be chumming the waters, it seems.
Yes. Through the chair to Councillor Liu. It's not 100% true that salmon will not use a dark tunnel. It varies with the species. It varies with how many of them there are. It varies with a whole number of things. Chum, which are the most numerous, also tend to be quite sort of gregarious and will move about in larger schools and take larger risks. Chinook can be quite mysterious and cryptic in their behavior, and certainly some research in the United States shown that they are probably the most reluctant to enter a dark and particularly submerged culverts. And so that sort of speaks, the issue of culvert submergence speaks to the future of sea level rise, is that there will be a greater portion of time when that culvert is fully underwater, which is there's not as much willingness for juvenile fish to actually descend into a hole essentially and risk predation. Does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to all this work and then the fish wouldn't actually go there. And then, and another point, it mentions that there's beavers. So would the beavers have to be removed or relocated or something in order to facilitate this project?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, yes. As part of the project scope, we would look at impacts that the proposed project would have on the existing freshwater pond, and any mitigation would have to be implemented prior to construction.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. So I have a koi pond in my backyard, and I have to put a net over it to protect my koi from mostly raccoons, but also blue herons. How will we protect these salmonoids?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the size of the slough as well as the depth of water would provide adequate protection from predation, as well as overhanging shrubs and trees from on the side. But of course, we can't prevent all activity, predation by herons or otherwise, for sure. Just like we can't, prevent that from occurring in the Fraser River. I think when KWL looked at this project and designed it, and on balance, the creation of a tidally influenced slough would have a by far net benefit to the salmonid species that we're identifying to enhance by providing this habitat.
Are the experts able to provide any examples of where this type of project was also built and the success of it?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I believe my colleague Patrick Lilly has worked on several projects.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Through the chair to Councillor Day, we have worked on a couple of similar projects involving self-regulating tide gates that are of the type that are recommended in option 1. So there is actually at the mouth of Musqueam Creek on the Musqueam Reserve, just on the north arm of the Fraser, there's a similar structure. And there's also upstream in Colony Farm Regional Park in an area of the park called Wilson Farm. There's a self-regulating tide gate up there. So both of those are very similar structures and similar examples to this type of habitat enhancement project for fish, where we've opened up areas that were formerly behind dikes or in order to provide fish access back into those areas for salmon.
And they were successful?
Yeah, through the chair to the Councillor Day, yes, that there has been follow-up monitoring, and there's actually some further monitoring work that's proposed at the Wilson Farm project that's just getting underway that will actually help us understand, that 5 to 7 years after the project was completed, is it still providing the habitat value? So we're doing work to try and continue to learn from those projects to understand, but in general, those projects were quite successful in creating the right conditions for fish, and definitely monitoring has shown that salmon are using those areas.
Well, thank you very much for that. So as we go through this process, I would appreciate it if staff could give us updates on those other projects so we can have confidence that this will work as well. My last question is regarding DFO. We've made it clear that this project can be an offset for dike upgrades, and that we are working with the DFO to get their approval on it, and this kind of hinges on that. If we get DFO approval and if this goes forward, does that in turn give us the opportunity for funding or grants from the federal or provincial government?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I as indicated in the report, it's our understanding that funding is a possibility, but not to the extent that would significantly benefit the project. There are other opportunities identified in the report that include nonprofit agencies and the like that seek to support projects that enhance habitat for salmon. By all means, if this project were to move forward, and we would be going into the design and permitting phase, we would explore any and all options to make partnerships similar to what we have done, for example, in the past on the Grower lands with Ducks Unlimited.
All right, very good. Thank you for your help.
Councillor Steves, one last question.
Just a couple of comments, actually, and answer some of the questions. In terms of the elevation of the culvert and the rising sea level, Council is probably not aware, but our staff has a project going forward right now that came to the Food Security and Advisory Committee last week of raising all the farmland enrichment by 1 meter or 2. And so effectively, Terra Nova would have to be raised with good soil. Well, you're going to automatically, over the next 50 years, it'll be equivalent to having a dike. So effectively, if the land is raised up 1 meter or 2, you won't need a dike. You'll be raising all the land around it. And so that's the intent, simply because of the salt water incursion in the soils below, which makes it difficult to grow crops, etc. So I think 50 years from now, the council will look at maybe altering the culvert, because, mind you, you'll still have the same problem, but it will have to be raised up. The second comment I wanted to make, I just wanted to share with you, this little fellow I've got here is what a chum salmon fry looks like, the size of a chum salmon. This was caught in the Dyke Canal when I taught biology in the 60s, and I took my students around the canals seining to find out what was there. We found a number of chum salmon, but I'd say about 80 or 90% were sticklebacks. And in answer to Councillor Day's question, the reason we've got a heron problem now, they're eating around 3 to 6% of the chum salmon or other salmon fry, is simply because we don't have the minnows and sticklebacks in our sloughs and ditches anymore. When we put in pump stations in Richmond and got rid of the tidal influence, they died out. And so now the herons are looking wherever they can find chum salmon in the river, along the foreshore marshes, and the sloughs outside the dike, or the koi in your pond. So this may help feed the herons, because most of the fish in the pond probably will be minnows.
All right, do you want to move the recommendation?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion on that? Call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Rowe, if you have yet another question?
No, I had a comment as part of the discussion on the motion that was on the floor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So just to further what Councillor Al brought up which was what I had mentioned around the fish accessibility, I think that needs to have a higher priority. And the funding, if that is, because I don't see the formula that was used to have the recommendation. So I'm willing today to support option 3 or 4. Maybe ideally, we'd have a 3 and a 4 sometime in the future. And here's some of the reason behind the need to support those options. YVR was the first airport in North America to be salmon safe certified. I bet there's either a pool of money or a way when they open up and the skies are full of airplanes, they'll be raking in money to help salmon habitat to keep their leadership on that one. I think we have great organizations locally that will partner to do salmon work or habitat creation, like we've had with Ducks Unlimited, like Rain Coast is doing all over. I think this is the type of project where we can make bold decisions now, and we'll be backed by. This is the type of project where cities carve out a space for nature, as opposed to forever and ever lose spaces for nature. I've taken my daughter to the park there, and I know there's going to be impacts to the park. But, you know, vandalism impacts that park a lot. That big slide is rarely open when we're there. So I think impact to the park is given too much credibility right now in the deciding factor here. And also look at the options here. 4 and 5 can open up other areas and expand and give people a reason to know their own neighborhood and know salmon, care about salmon, and want to save salmon. I support option 1, but I'm also opposed to it, and because I see on the report and what the consultants have done, they've given us the view, and I think we should be bold and go with option 3 and 4. So I apologize, but I have to vote against option 1 on the floor.
All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. The next item, the application on the discharge of firearms. Did Robert McDonald ever join us? Okay, so we've got 2 delegations on this, but I understand that they are simply here to answer questions. Is Robert McDonald and Marshall Wirawan. I think I'm correct in that. So Greg Wheeler or Elizabeth Ayers, who's going to speak to this?
Mayor Brody, I'm here to answer any questions, and we have no further comments on the report.
Well,
Move the recommendation.
All right, so it's moved and seconded. I mean, this is simply to bring it into line, first of all, with what they've been doing and to check all the boxes for the requirements. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, through your worship, to staff on this one. I believe I just have 3 short questions. Does staff know off by hand the percentage of Vancouver Gun Club members that are Richmond residents?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, no, sorry, do not know that number.
70%.
I think I heard, no, it was your, Greg, your volume was quite low on my end.
Sorry. Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, no, I do not have that number.
Oh, okay, thank you. My next question is, do they provide firearm discharge education Richmond-wide? I know Richmond Rod and Gun Club has a role in that. Does Vancouver Gun Club have any role in educating like hunting regions in Richmond? Do they have pamphlets that they provide to their members? Or?
Through the chair, sorry, I don't have an answer on that. Maybe one of the delegates could.
Thank you. If there's a delegate available to answer that? Or?
Yes, through the chair, Councillor Wolf. This is Marshall Wirawan. I'm a volunteer at the Vancouver Gun Club. We are a sports shooting facility. A lot of our memberships and guests are hunters, but we throw clay targets and we cater to the sports shooting part. We advocate gun safety, obviously, and we run a Canadian firearms safety course on site that is being taught by a retired member of the RCMP. But in terms of outreach, in terms of like pamphlets and that kind of thing, we don't have anything like that.
Perfect. Then just to follow up to that, could you name what is the program that Vancouver Gun Club does offer to Richmond residents if they were a member? Is it the core program? What type of certification could they get?
So the people that can use our facility has to be a licensed gun owner because we don't rent guns. Like they have to bring their own firearms. We strictly provide the facility and the target. We have an safety orientation course that everyone has to take in order to satisfy that they're able to use the firearm safely. But for those individuals that are not licensed but are willing to become licensed, we offer It's what's called the Canadian Firearm Safety Course. It's a requirement to obtain a possession and acquisition license to purchase a firearm, and that is taught at our facility by a retired RCMP member and a certified instructor, roughly between 2 or 3 times a month on weekends.
Thank you very much for being here to clarify that and answer that question. Just lastly, just a comment then. I will be in support of this, and I know staff are working on other firearm discharge, either bylaw upgrades or looking at the map and that kind of thing. Is there anything that we should be considering with today's item that would relate to that larger referral?
Through the chair, is Cecilia speaking. That is a completely separate referral because that has to do with federal and provincial legislation, and for us to harmonize with that. So it's quite separate from the use of a facility.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to call the question then. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? That is carried. And may we have a motion to adjourn? All right, we're now adjourned, and just give us a second and we'll go into the Finance Committee meeting. Okay, I'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. May I have a motion on the minutes of April 6th? Moved and seconded, discussion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. We have a delegation, a short delegation from KPMG. CJ James is here with us. CJ, what do you want to add to the reports?
Good afternoon, Your Worship. Thank you. We actually don't have anything to add to our report that has already been included as part of the Finance Committee package. If I may, I think the only real thing I wanted to add is just to thank management for all of their hard work. Their preparation and assistance during our audit last year. We did complete our audit fieldwork right before COVID-19, but this year the audit was performed completely remotely, and we really could not have been able to complete our audit without management and all of their work and their preparation. So just thank you very much to Jerry Chong, Ivy Wong, and Cindy Gilfillan and their finance team. Great work by them all.
So are you going to stick around on the individual reports in case there's any questions?
Certainly, we can do that.
Okay, I think that would be helpful. All right, then we'll go to number 2, the 2020 Consolidated Financial Statements. Says Speaker is Cindy Gilfillan. Cindy, anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add.
All right.
There's a recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Then we have the financial statements for the library. Susan, anything to add?
No, I have nothing to add tonight, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have for me.
All right. We have a
There's a recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? So that is carried. Then we have Lulu Island Energy Company, Jerry Chong, Alan Postolka.
Your Worship, Alan Postolka is here. I have nothing to add to the report, Your Worship.
Someone want to move it? Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Bringing us to the final set in the Oval Corporation audited financial statements. Rick Desange, anything to add to your report, Rick?
Nothing further to add, Your Worship.
All right, may I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Someone move adjournment? Okay, we're now adjourned. And I'm going to call the closed General Purposes Committee meeting to order. May I have a motion on